Today, we're going to tackle a really critical moment in history, the Nuremberg Laws. We're going to look at how a government can take something like its own legal system and turn it into a weapon to strip people of their rights, which then set the stage for an unimaginable tragedy. Okay, let's get into it.
Just think about that for a second. We usually think of laws as being there for our protection, for fairness, right? But what happens when they're used for the exact opposite? That's what this is all about. How that very thing happened in Germany back in the 1930s.
So, before 1935, prejudice against Jewish people in Germany was definitely there, but it was kind of all over the place. It was widespread, for sure, but there wasn't a single national system for it. But a huge, dark shift was coming.
Then, at this massive party rally in the city of Nuremberg, the government didn't just give speeches, they actually announced a whole new set of laws. And this was the turning point. All that widespread prejudice was about to become official. It went from being a social problem to a state-sponsored policy, creating the legal foundation for everything that came next.
The Nuremberg legislation really rested on two main pillars. Each one targeted a different part of a person's life, but they were both designed to achieve the same chilling goal. Let's break down what they were.
Okay, so the key thing to get is how these two laws work together as a one-two punch. On the left, you've got the Reich Citizenship Law. This was all about your public life. It took away citizenship from Jewish people, took away their right to vote, and stopped them from working in government jobs. Then on the right, you have the Law for the Protection of German Blood. This one went after private life, banning marriages and relationships to force total social separation. So one law cut you off from your country, and the other cut you off from your own neighbors.
And they did this by basically inventing new legal terms. They split the population into two groups. You were either a Reich citizen with full political rights, or you were a state subject with basically no rights at all. You could live in the country, but you weren't considered a member of it. And what's crucial is that this wasn't about what you believed or practiced. It was all based on your family tree.
And that gets us to the really twisted idea at the heart of these laws. See, the government had to figure out a way to decide who was who. Their solution? To define a person's identity, not by their faith or their culture, but by this idea of blood or ancestry. Now, this was a massive change. In the past, discrimination was often about religion. So, in theory at least, a person could convert. But under these new laws, totally irrelevant. Your legal identity was locked in the moment you were born, all decided by who your grandparents were. There was absolutely no way to change it.
It all came down to this cold, mathematical formula they called the grandparent rule. Here's how it worked. If 3 or 4 of your grandparents were Jewish, then the state legally classified you as Jewish. Your personal beliefs meant nothing. If you had just 1 or 2, you were labeled Mischlinge, which means mixed heritage, and you still faced a whole bunch of severe restrictions. Your entire life was basically decided by a rule about your ancestors.
So, what did all this legal stuff actually mean for people's real everyday lives? Well, these laws didn't just sit in a book somewhere. They immediately started to tear people's lives apart, piece by piece. Professionally, the effect was devastating. Jewish doctors and lawyers suddenly couldn't have non-Jewish clients. Thousands of amazing teachers and public servants were fired overnight. Young people had their dreams shattered when they were kicked out of schools and universities. And businesses that families had built for generations were just taken away. The goal was to completely push Jewish people out of the economy.
And everyday life just became a minefield. You know, simple things we don't even think about, like going to a park, watching a movie, or just buying food, all of that became impossible, or at least incredibly dangerous. Public places became places of humiliation. Fear was just normal, and families were totally cut off from the communities they'd always been a part of.
And the persecution got bureaucratic too. To make it easy to identify people, the government made a new rule. All passports belonging to Jewish people had to be stamped with a huge red-letter J. This not only marked them inside Germany, but it also made it nearly impossible to escape, because other countries would see that stamp and often refuse to let them in.
And then it got even more personal. A new law forced Jewish women and men to add the name Sarah or Israel to their official documents as a middle name. This was just another way to control people, to erase their individual identity and slap a state-mandated label on them instead.
You have to understand, these laws weren't the end of the story. They were the beginning. They were the legal foundation that made much worse things possible. They created a system that allowed the state to go from legal discrimination to organized physical violence.
This timeline really shows that terrible domino effect. In 1935, you have the laws written down on paper. By 1938, you have Kristallnacht, a nationwide coordinated wave of brutal violence. The laws had identified and isolated a group of people, which made that violence possible. It wasn't until after the war, in 1945, that these laws were finally thrown out and their creators were held accountable for their crime. The legacy of the Nuremberg Laws is this powerful, permanent warning. They showed the world just how easily a legal system, something that's supposed to protect people, can be twisted into a weapon of persecution. In fact, a lot of the modern international human rights declarations we have today were created in direct response to these events, to try and make sure this never, ever happens again.
And that leaves us with one final thought. This isn't just about the past. Understanding how laws can be used to divide people and take away their humanity is absolutely essential if we want to protect fairness and justice in our own time. It's a powerful reminder that a just society needs laws that protect everyone with no exceptions.